The Bard was introduced to Baldur's Gate 3 a long time ago, and I'm just talking about it now. And that's okay. It's what I keep telling myself. Okay, scratch that. New opening, go. So you want to be a Bard. Well, you've got options. Some great, some not great. I'm going to talk a bit about the great ones while briefly mentioning their not so great alternatives. But rather than thinking of this as like a guide, think of it as more like a brochure. A brochure with a commentary track. Now before I get to the Bard talk, hi, welcome, nice to see you. I'm Brian, and I like Baldur's Gate 3 and just RPGs in general. But like I really like Baldur's Gate 3 a lot. If these are things you like too, maybe you also like this video. You know, there's a button to express such feelings. There's also another button to express your desire to see more videos like this, specifically made by me. It's big, it's red, and it says subscribe on it. I don't know what it means, just thought it'd be pretty interesting to point it out, in case you never heard of it. Okay, so let's talk about bards, and why the gnome bard is the best bard. Bards in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons have been significantly upgraded from their previous incarnations. They're full casters now, and their trademark versatility has been enhanced to make it a standout feature of the class. And they still boast a pretty unique spell list, which can be expanded by mixing other class spell lists in a little bit later down the road. Anyway, there's not much to complain about here, except the packaging. You see, the flavoring for the Bard in 5th edition D&D is pretty one note. They're rock stars. They're charismatic, smooth-talking rock stars, and that's a little boring after a while. Let's think of a real-life example of a bard. A person someone might call a bard, perhaps the Bard. All right, fine, I know, this is a fantasy game. How about a fantasy example? From Dungeons & Dragons, maybe? Maybe from the Forgotten Realms? Maybe from the Baldur's Gate series? I think you get it. Bards aren't just musicians, they're poets, journalists, investigators, detectives, storytellers. Music's just one choice of media for their talents. Look, that's the end of the rant. I swear, I'm sorry, just hashtag bards are more than musicians. So, your bard is going to be able to cast some spells, and they can offer support and a little bit of enemy control. That's cool. How do we go about building one? Well, bards are a charisma-based caster, and I know, this is a brand new concept to 5th edition D&D and Baldur's Gate 3. It's so unique. Whatever, it's fine. If you're looking for those charisma boosts, you've got a lot of racial lineage options to choose from. You've got the tiefling, you've got the drow, you've got humans, you've got half-elves, you've got the lightfoot halflings. Did I mention gnome on that list? That's weird. I swear they're the best bard. We'll circle back to it. From that curated list above, I'd go either half wood elf or lightfoot halfling. Both of these options are going to give you stealth, and the half-elf is going to give you a +2 to charisma and an additional 2 +1s to divvy out however you like. Plus you get a nice boost to your movement speed. Now the halfling's only going to give you a +1 to charisma, but you're going to get lucky and brave. And these are concentration-free and spell slot-free features that are extremely powerful. And look, I know we all want the highest stats, right? Gotta get that 20 charisma ASAP. But in early access here, you're not seeing a big difference between starting with a 17 over a 16. I'll get into that more when I get to leveling up at level 4. It's basically that feats can play a role in making the 17 a little bit better, but not in early access. So anyway, you're of course going to go with a high charisma score, and you probably want dexterity to be your next highest. That's for your armor class and attack rolls. Wisdom's not a bad idea. Boost your saving throw there for a bit. And of course, when they implement multi-classing, this is all going to change. But for the better for the most part. Let's start off with taking a look at the Bard's spells. Tricked you! It's a spell review video. No, we're just going to talk about them. We're not ranking them or anything. Just a brief look. Vicious Mockery. It's a classic, right? It's like the quintessential Bard ability. It's their cantrip. It sucks. First off, it's a saving throw cantrip. We hate those. Why? No critical hits. Never. Don't happen. Get out of here. All right, next up, D4 damage. What? Yeah. And it is psychic damage, which is what I like to call a good damage type, but it does not make up for that D4. Now there is a saving grace here though. When your target fails their saving throw, they'll not only take that 1d4 psychic damage, but they'll also have disadvantage imposed on their next attack roll or saving throw that they make. So that's pretty good. Now if only there was something like a condition you could impose on somebody that always gave them disadvantage on their attack rolls. Say poison? I don't know. We'll think about it. For level 1 spells, you're going to see Dissonant Whispers, which isn't exactly new. We've seen it for the Great Old One Warlock subclass, but this is the first time it's appearing on a base class spell list, so it was worth mentioning. Now, a real newbie you're going to see is Heroism. It's going to give your target 5 temporary HP each round that you're holding concentration, and that can be held for up to 10 rounds, so a total of 50 temporary HP dished out, which is nothing to sneeze at. It's not trivial. So what should we go with here? Clearly True Strike and Mage Hand. All right. Look, this is kind of like a you do you thing. A lot of personal preference is going to come into play here because you're not missing out on much if you don't take Vicious Mockery. It's also not a terrible idea to take Vicious Mockery. And you also get to hear your bard say cool little insults, which is a lot of fun. For your level 1 spells, I hope you're taking Tasha's Hideous Laughter. And if you're not, you've got some explaining to do. Look, it's not a new fun spell to try out or anything, but it's as good as it's always been, which is good. It's a good spell. Other than that, maybe you want Sleep. You know, that's a saving throw free, attack roll free, just 100% chance to take out some low hit point themselves, but nonetheless hit point draining monsters of sorts. Of course, until their friends shove them for a bonus action to wake them up. Or Fairy Fire. You hold concentration, and everybody gets advantage against whatever targets fall into that area and also fail their throw. Well, let's talk about your Bard features. You're getting Bardic Inspiration. You get to grant an ally, or yourself, plus 1d6 to the next attack roll, saving throw, or ability check. And you get to choose, sort of. Like, you get to choose what type of roll it's going to automatically be applied to. You don't get to choose in the moment. Now, how does that make a difference? Well, see, in the tabletop version of 5th edition D&D, you get to choose in the moment when it gets to be rolled. Let's take a look at an example how it would work differently. Let's say in Baldur's Gate 3, you've selected attack rolls, and then it's that character's turn, and they're going to make an attack roll. Now, if it was in tabletop D&D and they rolled a nat 20, since you get to choose after rolling the d20 whether or not you apply that 1d6, you would say, well, it's a nat 20. Even if they mitigate the critical hit, it's an automatic hit. I've hit them. I don't need plus 1d6. Let me hold on to it. If it's Baldur's Gate 3, you had attack roll selected. It's applying the 1d6 to it. You've wasted it. Now, maybe they'll change that in the future. Maybe it'll get implemented differently at some point. But right now, that's the way it is, and it's not great. Now, you're going to have a better option for this 1d6 when your bard gets their subclass, Valor Bard. And it's going to be Valor. And we'll talk about it more in depth, but, I mean, Lore Bard is very flavorful and really good in tabletop. It's just not holding a candle to Valor in Baldur's Gate 3 right now. But real quick, if you do want to do Lore Bard, and here at level 1 you're making your character, do not take Arcana, Intimidate, or Sleight of Hand for your proficiencies. You're going to automatically get those at level 3 when you choose Lore, and right now there's no way to switch them out, so it would just be a wasted feature. Now you might notice I'm making a Gnome Bard here. Not a Half-Wood Elf, not a Lightfoot Halfling. Okay, so Bard saving throw proficiencies are not great. Gnomes are going to get advantage on all their wisdom, intelligence, and charisma saves. And your wisdom saving throws are usually going to be against very detrimental things like hold person, command, yada yada. And gnomes are also going to have dark vision, which, as we all know, is like this super rare and super helpful. Okay, look. When I grew up playing D&D, none of the racial lineages got a bonus to charisma. In fact, some of them got penalties. Outside the scope of Baldur's Gate 3, there was an ability called Favored Class, and it basically was incentivizing you to select a certain class because it would remove some penalties down the line if you decided to multi-class. And the favored class for the gnome was the Bard. Gnomes also had a lot of flavorful illusion-based abilities that came into play. So besides the game literally incentivizing you to make a gnome bard, gnomes also had a lot of fun, illusion-based social interaction abilities that just made for a very, very fun bard playthrough as a gnome. And look, bottom line, I just like gnome bards. I just think it's funny. You know, I know it's not a unique opinion. People like playing against type. Not everybody wants to optimize everything at all times, which in itself is also a fun thing to do. But hey, I'm interested in hearing some unconventional characters. You know, even if it's not a bard. What are their names? If you got a background for them, that'd be pretty cool. I don't know. Pop a comment down there. I'd like to read it. Now, what happens when we level up? Well, we get Song of Rest, which is a third short rest, which I can get along with a fourth one by taking a long rest. I mean, I just don't think it's that great an ability. I I mean, unless you have a pretty short rest heavy party, like fighters need their action surge back, warlocks need their spell slots back, maybe you're in the Hag's Den or some other place that doesn't allow you to take a long rest while you're there or fast travel out. And maybe it's just too much of a hassle to backtrack your way out and take your long rest and reset your short rest usages. Maybe in that situation, it's very useful. And look, personally, I see the value here because of my playstyle. My playstyle is actually very much roleplay intensive and a little more immersive. I don't really like cheesing game mechanics or gaming the system too much. I like reading up on that and I like knowing how to do it. I don't really do it in my personal playthroughs though. But if you just look at it mechanically and how it interacts with the game system, it's kind of meh. Well, hey, what's this? Jack of all trades. This is pretty cool. Anything you aren't proficient in, well, you kind of are. Kind of. Any ability check you make without proficiency now gets half your proficiency bonus added to it. This is obviously better at higher levels as your proficiency bonus goes up, but it's still really good right now. Hey, do you know it's an ability check that no one has proficiency in? Initiative. Neat. Okay, now we're level 3. Before you go ahead and choose Valor Bard, like all good bards do, let's see what features we get regardless of subclass. Expertise. It's fantastic. You pick 2 skills, I like Persuasion and Deception, and now you get your proficiency bonus added a second time to those checks. Mathematically, this is about half as good as Advantage at level 1, and this is going to get better as we progress through the level tiers in the full game. Now, level 2 spells. What do we have here? Phantasmal Force. Go ahead and read the description, it's a pretty dope concept, but let's take a look at it mechanically. It's a continual 1d6 damage that requires concentration. Now again, psychic damage is pretty good, but it's only psychic damage so long as no other damage type makes its way to that target. You see, the spell will copy the damage type of the previous damage source to the target. It's not necessarily a bad thing though, because you can game this pretty nicely for vulnerabilities and surface effects, but in general, this type of tactic will use up more spell slots, maybe another character's turn, so unless you can get a killer combo going, I would just pick a better spell. And the next new spell we see is Calm Emotions. You can end and inoculate against the charmed and frightened conditions in an area of effect. Not too shabby. If you want to know what level 2 spells to pick, you can go ahead and check out my... Oh, damn. I really need to make those level 2 spell videos. Alright, look, this is another point where it's really up to your playstyle. Heat Metal, Cloud of Daggers, those are excellent choices for straight up damage, and Heat Metal doubles as sort of minor battlefield control because you can potentially disarm the target. If you just want straight up control, nothing new here. Hold Person's great. Your Calm Emotions can be pretty good in specific scenarios if you don't already have a way to mitigate fear and charmed effects. And even if you do, Calm Emotions is probably a better mitigation tool. Remember when I said you get a better use for Bardic Inspiration here? Well, your Valor Bard's Combat Inspiration allows that 1d6 to be applied to damage rolls of whoever you're inspiring, or to Armor class as a reaction ability. Go for damage most of the time, because until they fix how reactions are implemented, it's just too unpredictable how that +2 AC is going to work in your favor. Damage is going to be more consistently good for you. Now, if you do go lore, you're going to end up with Cutting Words, which is not terrible. Your target's going to be an enemy this time, and they're going to take a negative 1d6 to attack rolls, damage rolls, and ability checks until the start of your next turn. And yes, those are ands, and yes, those words were plural. So this is extremely effective against multi-attack creatures, because each attack roll and each damage roll will all get a minus 1d6 to them, which is averaging like minus 3.5. Now at level 4, you're going to be able to boost your charisma to 18, or 19 if you insisted on starting with a 17 instead of a 16. Feats are not that great. I mean, if you really want like more spells from other class lists, you can take Magic Initiate. Maybe you want to wear heavy armor now, I don't know, but none of them are really worth missing out on that plus 5% success rate to your spells, which is what raising your charisma modifier ends up doing. Maybe full release with all the available feats from like the player's handbook, maybe the extra ones like Xanathar's that might help. But right now I just take the ability score increase. This is where taking a 17 over 16 could win out if they had the nice feats. Because some of the feats in the player's handbook, in addition to granting you a pretty cool feature, will increase an ability score by 1. So if you had a 17, you could take a feat, which will still boost you to 18 and give you a cool feature. Whereas if you had a 16 and you want that 18 at level 4, you're going to have to skip the feat and just boost your 16 to an 18. Something to think about. So that's how I would build and level a bard in Baldur's Gate 3 Early Access. It's by no means objectively the best way to do it. But if you're not looking to get into the nitty-gritty of mechanics, I think this is a pretty decent, suggested option to follow. Speaking of follow, I just learned that little red box says subscribe, not subscribe. And it turns out subscribe is sort of like a follow. You're gonna see other content I put out before the algorithm decides to just randomly toss it your way. If that's something you're interested in, go ahead and click it. And thanks for sticking around to the end. Hope to see you in a future one. Take care.